Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Articulate Storyline workshop. These are the workshops where you vote for what we build and then we build it together. And the winner of today's vote is a custom drag and drop interaction. So we're going to build this drag and drop interaction from scratch. We're not going to use the built-in storyline functionality. And the way we're going to do this will make heavy use of layers. And this is something you all have been requesting for a while. I think this exact option, the custom drag and drop interaction, was like neck and neck with another option, like all the way back in Articulate Storyline Workshop number 2 or 3. So this one has been a long time coming, and we're finally building it today. So for those of you where this is your first workshop like this, and if you're very new to Storyline, I would recommend just observing and watching and trying to see what we're doing. Look at the tips people are sharing in the chat, and then try to do it yourself as you watch the replay, because trying to follow along live if you're new probably won't end super well, because we do move fairly quickly. We want to make sure that whether you're a beginner or someone who's been using Storyline for years, that you get something out of these sessions. So with that being said, I think we are going to dive right in here. So let me share my screen and we will get started. Okay. And feel free to ask questions in the chat. If I don't see them, we have some other Storyline pros here who should be able to help out. Okay, so I have Storyline open here, and all I've done is I open Storyline and press like new project. So we have a very fresh project here. We have a couple of housekeeping items that we do every time we start one of these projects. So you all know by now, I don't like this desktop 4:3 layout. I want to go with this nice 16:9 widescreen aspect ratio. Okay, so all I did is I double clicked on this slide to go into slide view. And now that we're here, I'm on the home tab and I want to go to this player option right here. That's how we're going to change these player settings. So I've seen a few questions about this in the chat. Sorry, yeah, I said I was going to change the aspect ratio, but we also need to change player settings. So let's do the aspect ratio first. So we'll go to the design tab actually, then we will go to story size, and we will change it to 16:9. Okay, so 16:9 is the same aspect ratio as like YouTube videos or typical videos. We can see this check box is checked, so we have this aspect ratio locked. And now we can change the width to something bigger like 1280. And then I just pressed tab after typing that to kind of set it. So now we have 1280 by 720. It's the 16:9 aspect ratio. When we press OK, we'll see now we have this bigger widescreen canvas to work with. So every slide in our project now will be this new aspect ratio. So we have a wider screen. If you're on mobile and you turn your phone sideways, it will fill up the entire screen. So this is good. Can this size be set as a default? I don't think that's possible. I don't think there's a way to like set a default size. If anyone knows otherwise, let us know. But I think we have to change this every time we open a new project. Good question though. I would be interested to know if that is possible. Okay, so now we will go back to the home tab and we will change these player settings. So go to the home tab, we'll go over here to player. And I saw some questions about like how to change all of these options. And I don't know if I've really dove into that very much in other projects. But when I first started using Storyline, there was this classic player, okay? So you see here with player style, it can be classic or modern. If we look at the color and effects options for classic players, we can go to colors and effects and then show advanced color editing. And you can change the color for like every single thing on this player. So this classic player is where you have this like really in-depth control over the player. And the player, for those who are new, is everything that surrounds the slide that we build. So the white screen we saw in Storyline, that sits inside of this. All of these other things around it, that's the player. Now, since they made the modern player, our options are much more limited, and you can see it looks more modern, right? So in most cases, both with when I use the classic player and now that I use the modern player, I just kind of get rid of the player. Okay. So in the classic player, that was like you had to go into like all of these different settings and change the transparency to 100%. But in the modern player, all you have to do is turn off the players and controls and change it to light mode. Okay? So we're not going to go into how to fix that classic player. We just want to get rid of the player so that all we see is what's on the slide itself. So we're modern player style, turning off the menus and controls, and then just choosing this light mode. So now when we press OK, that player won't be there. As long as we don't have these next and previous buttons, but let's see. What we're looking for is just a white screen. And that's what we have. So we were successful with that. It doesn't even show the next and previous buttons, so we are good. Okay, so we're building a custom drag and drop experience now, okay? So I think when I was thinking of ideas for this, I think what we should build is we will build, how about just like a 2-column drag and drop and a different tool appears in the middle. So maybe on the left, we have to drag all of the tools that are part of the Articulate 360 suite. And on the right, we can drag tools that are part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. Okay? So let's do that. So I'm just going to build a basic layout here. I'm going to the Insert tab. I'm going to select a shape, and we're going to click the rectangle shape, and I will just kind of draw that rectangle on the screen. Okay? These are basically going to be like our drop targets where we're dropping these different tool names. All right, so we need to apply some formatting here. I don't want it to have this blue fill. So I'm going to select the rectangle and then go to the Format tab up here at the top. Now I am going to get rid of the shape fill. So we can do that by clicking the little drop-down arrow next to shape fill and then pressing no fill. So there we go, we got rid of that fill. It's just transparent now. And now our outline we can make a little bit thicker because you can see it's pretty thin right now. So let me click on the drop down next to shape outline. We'll go to weight and make it maybe 3 pixels. I don't think that actually went through. Oh, it's saying it did. So I guess it was on 3 pixels. Let's try. Okay, it was. I really don't think that's 3 pixels, but I guess it was. Oh, because we made it 1280 pixels, it probably looks smaller. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to change the color now. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to more outline colors. And I'm just going to type in a hex code here that I use like for buttons and stuff on my website. Then I'll press OK. All right, here we go. So this is one of these drop targets. So I think now we can just kind of drag this. You've seen me do this a lot if you've been to many of these workshops. I'm dragging it. I'm holding down the Shift key on my keyboard so that it doesn't. Like, watch if I let go of Shift. See, now it's like you have to just be more precise, but if you hold down Shift, it like locks it a bit better. And now if I hold down the Control key on my keyboard, when I let go, it will make a copy of this box. Okay, so you've seen me do that a lot. I'm going to let go of my mouse. There we go, we have a copy because I was holding down the Control key at the time I let go of my mouse click. All right, let's see. I could probably make these a little wider. You just try this. I want to make a text box now, okay? I want to label each one of these. So I'm going to select this one. I'm going to hold down the Shift key to also select this one. And I'm just going to drag down from this top center point to make them a little bit shorter. And I think now I just want to add a label. So over here, I want it to be Articulate 360. And over here, I want it to be Creative Cloud. Okay. So there are a few ways we can make text boxes. So one way is to go to the Insert tab and then go to Text Box. And now you can see our cursor is like this plus sign. So wherever we click, it will start our text box. So if I click here, there we go. Now I just want to type in Articulate 360. Right? That is that, but I don't want to use this default font and font size. I want to use my brand font, so I'll make it Futura PT Bold. And let's go with like size 34 font. I think that's looking good to me. We'll use some alignment tricks. So I'm going to, again, use Shift so that I can select both of these options. And look what we're going to do. I mean, I haven't really broken this down in a few of these sessions. Like, it's been a little while. So if we want to automatically align this text box with this box to the center, with them both selected, we can press Align Center. And you see how it does it to the center? So the way this works is whatever is on the inside will align to whatever is on the outside. So watch, if I align this to the right, it's going to go all the way to the right, and then I can bounce it back to the left. Okay, so you see how I do that? It's really good to get that like mathematical precision. And this is on the Format tab under this Arrange and Align section. So if I wanted to like align this to the right of this one, watch what, okay, let me just demonstrate this. So you see how this text box is not inside of this rectangle? Like it is inside of the one beneath it, but not this one over here. If I try to center these, I think it will try to split the difference and they will both move. You see? So we don't want that. I'm going to undo that. So if I wanted this heading to be aligned with this, first I would right align it, and now I would center align it. You see how that happens? Because once it's right aligned, now it's within this box beneath it, so now I can center align it. Okay? Don't worry if that was confusing. Again, if you're a beginner, you're like, maybe like, what is this guy talking about? I'm just going to put that back where it belongs. I'm going to make a copy of this text box. So I use that trick a lot. The drag and drop with control selected so that we can make a copy. And the other way to make a text box that someone shared in one of these sessions is just a nice shortcut is Control T. So wherever my mouse is, let's actually do that now. So if I wanted to put the things I'm dragging right here, I could just put my mouse here and then I'll do Control T. And then it makes a text box wherever your mouse head was. Okay, any questions about what we're doing so far? I'm just going to get rid of these triggers from the slide. We don't need these next and previous button triggers, so that was just irrelevant. Now here's how this is going to work, okay? Let me just explain this. How I want this to function is I want something to appear here in the center, and then I want to have to drag it to the correct side, okay? Once we drag it to the right side, I want it to show the next layer where the next item is that we have to drag to the right side. Okay, so if they drag it to the wrong side, I want it to just bounce back to where it was and not do anything. Okay, we're just building like a prototype here because I want to make sure we get the fundamentals down really well, because then you can do fancier things down the line. And just to make sure we get this, let's label things better, okay? So I'm going to label each one of these items a bit more intentionally. So first I'll click this Articulate 360 box. If I double click out here to the left on the timeline, you see where it's called text box 1? I can double click that and I will just name it Articulate 360. Same thing with text box 2. I'll double click it and rename it Creative Cloud. With rectangle 2, I will rename it CC Drop Box, because that's where we want to drop the Creative Cloud items. And rectangle 1, I will rename A360 Dropbox. Okay, so these will just be naming things like this will just make it easier later on when we're trying to make triggers. So now we're not sorting through like 15 text boxes. Instead, we can just see, Articulate 360 or Creative Cloud. That's good. Okay, Pranita is asking if there's an option where the incorrect one comes back in the middle with a different color indicating incorrect. Yes, we could do that. Let's see how we're doing on time, but we could do that. Now, when people are making interactions like this, like slides that rely on layers, it's really tempting to just build your first text box on the base layer. So let's do that. And let's actually build it out and see what problem that causes, okay? I think that will be helpful. So right here, let's make our first thing storyline, okay? We'll give them a nice, easy one. We know that's part of the Articulate 360 suite. So let's fix up the font here. I want to go with Futura PT Book, and let's go with size 20. Let's go size 28 font. So the reason I went with this book font is so that we can have some nice contrast between the heading and this. Because watch, let's see, if we use the same exact font and made it bold, you see there's not as much contrast, so it doesn't look as like distinct, and there's not as much like hierarchy. We want to make it very clear, this is the heading and these are the individual tools. Okay, so that's that. We want to center this. I want to maybe center this within these rectangles. So I used that trick again. I selected both and then aligned it to that middle point. So here we go. So when we start this, our goal is to drag this storyline box to the right side. Okay. So now let's make a new layer. And let's say this layer is called Rise. Okay. So here's how we would set this trigger up. Watch. So let's say, and again, this is the wrong way to do it because we wouldn't want to have this drag item on the base layer. Let me just show you why really quickly. Okay, so we'll make a trigger. I'm eventually going to want to use hotspot, so let me just do this now. I'm going to make a hotspot so that whenever, and this is okay, sorry, I'm moving quickly. So I went to the insert tab and I inserted a hotspot. This is basically just a transparent shape that we can add interactions to. So like when the user clicks on this, it will bring them to a slide. When something is dropped on this, we can make storyline do something. It looks green to us on the development side, but when we preview or publish this box will be completely invisible. You'll see why I'm using a hotspot instead of just dragging it on this rectangle in a couple of minutes. So let's set up this trigger. So over here is the triggers panel. For those of you who are very new, triggers are how you add interactivity to storyline. So I'm going to just press create a new trigger. And then you can see we have action. So this is where we set up our action. So when this thing happens, oh no, sorry. When something happens, we want to do this thing. So we want to show a new layer. We want to show that rise layer when an object is dropped on. Okay, so this is how we use that custom drag and drop interactivity. It's just with this when trigger. So when the user drops the object on the target, we're going to show this rise layer. Okay, so our object is text box 1 storyline, which we should have named storyline, on the target hotspot 1. Okay, so I need to fix up this naming a little bit, but just watch what happens here. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to do Control-C on this text box and then paste it on this rise layer. And I'm going to make this one say rise. Right? Because once they drop storyline successfully, now we want rise to show up and they can drop the rise one on the right place. So watch what happens. And there's still more I need to do, but I'm just illustrating this main point here. So when I drop storyline, we're gonna make it appear here on this thing. It won't do that yet. This is not what I expected to happen. But we're just going to do this a different way. I don't want to build it the wrong way. Just trust me that it will cause problems, okay? When you are building, here's the main point. When you're building a slide with a base layer like this, where we know on every single layer, we want these boxes to appear and we want these headings to appear, don't include this drop target on the base layer because we don't want storyline to show up on every single slide. We want more control over how this appears. Okay. I'm sorry if I'm not explaining this super well. Just trust me on this, okay? So on slides like this, what we're going to do is as soon as the timeline starts on this base layer, we're going to show the storyline layer, okay? I'll try to explain this more as we set some of this up. So we're going to show a layer, storyline, when the timeline starts on this slide. Okay, so as soon as someone hits this base layer, this layer will appear. And I'm going to show you some really important settings. So for those of you who are new, if you've used like Photoshop or Illustrator or anything like that, a layer is just like something that goes on top of the base layer. and you can keep stacking them up so they go on top of the ones before them. Now, how layers function depends entirely on how you have these layer properties set up. So like you see here, I selected this storyline layer, and now I'm going to select this properties icon in the bottom right. So now you can see we have these options. We can hide other slide layers, which always by default is selected. So this is different than the base layer. So if we hide objects on the base layer, now we won't see those rectangles that we set up whenever this layer appears. Okay, so we don't want that. We want everything on the base layer to show through, and that's why we took storyline and put it on a separate layer. Okay. And you'll see why in a second, because we want to have very strict control over where storyline gets placed in this box. You saw on the when we did it initially, just like placed it in the center. We don't want that, because if we kept doing that, they would all just stack up on the center on top of each other. Okay, if they were all in the base layer. So these layer properties are very important here. I don't know if we need to get into all of them here, but just visibility, just looking at visibility, this is important. So we're not hiding what's on the base layer. That's why those shapes we included can show through, but we are hiding the other slide layers. Okay, so let's start building this out so you can see it come to life a bit more. The reason we needed to use a hotspot instead of this rectangle is because we can't set a drop target that's not on this layer. So you see when I click on target, nothing really shows up. It actually doesn't even let us access this hotspot. Watch. Target, we have no targets because all we have on this layer is the text box. So we need to take this hotspot with us, put it on this storyline layer, and drag it over this. Okay, and we will call this A360 Dropbox. Okay, so now we have the same trigger, show layer rise, when the user drops text box 1 on the Articulate 360 Dropbox. Okay, so now what happens when someone drops this here, it will hide this whole layer and only show us this. Okay, so what that means is we need to take storyline now, and we need to just copied and pasted it. It brought this layer with it, which we don't need, so I'll press delete on that trigger. Sorry, it brought the trigger with it. But now I want to place it where I want over here on this layer. Okay, so we'll just keep this nice center alignment. So this should all be set up. So let me just explain what happens, and then we'll look at it. I know I've been bouncing all over. Please ask questions if you're confused right now. But let's see if this makes sense. So as soon as someone hits this slide, we have a trigger to show the storyline layer. Okay, so once this slide loads, this is the layer that we're on. Okay, so if someone drags this anywhere that's not on this drop spot, it will just bounce back into position. However, if they do drag it to this drop box, it will show the rise layer. And as soon as it shows this layer, it will hide this layer here. Okay, and we put storyline in this place exactly where we want it. We know that for them to get to this layer, storyline had to have been dropped on the right box. Okay, so let's see how this looks. So there we go. As soon as it loaded, we went to the storyline layer. That's what we wanted. If we drag this over here, it bounces back. Or if we drag it over here, now it shows the rise layer, and now we have this other thing to drag around. Okay, so this is one approach to drag and drops. This is building it custom from scratch with layers. Do we want to add in like a correct and incorrect layer? It's up to you all, but I mean, these are the building blocks. We can either build this version out and then see where we're at after that. Like you tell me what you want to do. Do we want to make this more complex, or do we want to add a few more layers just to make this more interactive? Jeb is asking, is there a way to copy and paste triggers so you don't do it for each single item? Yes, absolutely. You can copy and paste triggers. More complex, add more layers. Well, let's think. So what do we want to happen if someone drags it? Let's just make it a little bit more complex and then we'll add more options. So what do we want to happen if someone drops storyline on the wrong side? So first of all, let me just copy and paste this. So dragging, holding down control. I'm going to rename this Creative Cloud, or sorry, CC Dropbox. So what do we want to happen if they drag storyline over here? Do we want it to bounce back and then maybe like a little X appears beneath it? Let's do that. That sounds simple enough. So I'm going to go to the Insert tab and I'm going to go to Icons. I'm going to just press X. And what X icon do we want to appear? We don't need anything super fancy. Let's just go with this big, bold X. Okay, so what's going to happen? If someone drags storyline to the wrong drop target, we're going to make this red X appear. So let's make it red. There we go. So now we are using states, okay? Mahmoud is asking, why don't we use freeform with showing single answer? We want that control, and we want to just get complex with layers. It's really just a learning experience to see what we can and can't do with layers. But I have built things out custom like this for clients. But yeah, we can use some of Storyline's built-in interactions to make this a bit more efficient. But you guys may have been able to tell from coming to these sessions, I like just building everything from scratch most of the time. But let's see here. So we can just use states for this. So again, if you're new, you're just getting exposed to everything in this session. So we don't want this to appear as soon as someone sees this layer, right? We want to make this hidden by default. So when I select this X, I can go to the States tab, and I can change this initial state to hidden. So now we can still see it, but when someone sees this, that will be completely invisible, like when it's previewed or published. So what do you think the trigger would be to change the state of this X to normal? Some of you are probably already have this in mind, but I'm going to create that trigger. So I'm going to press the new trigger option. We are going to change the state of icon 1 to normal, not when the timeline starts, but when an object is dropped on. Okay, you see where I'm going with this? When the when the text box 1 is dropped on the Creative Cloud Dropbox. So you see how we set up that trigger? Here's what we did. We made this little X, we made it hidden by default, and then we created a trigger so that whenever someone drags storyline over the Creative Cloud Dropbox, it changes the state of that X to normal because we wanted to show us now we got that incorrect. So I'm going to press OK now, and let's see how this functions. Okay, so here we are. So if we just drag this like up here, it's not going to do anything. It's not correct or incorrect, so it will just snap it right back to where it was. You see? But if we drag it now over here, and when I let go, that X should appear. Okay. This is a problem though, because it wants to just put it right here. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, so has anyone worked with this recently? Like, I know in the freeform interactions, we can turn that off, but it doesn't seem it's going to let us do that here. We have to get creative with this, I believe. Okay. So let's see. Am I using a text shortcut to create a new trigger? I'm not, but if you have one, let us know. Pranita, yeah, we need that text box to come back too. I don't know if it has always functioned like this, but we need to get into this storyline problem solving mindset now. And how do we stop that from happening? So drop incorrect. The way I would do this is we can program this, but it's going to get complex and it's probably going to lose some newer people. So we have, again, two options here. do you want to see how I would fix this and we might get sent down a rabbit hole, or do we want to just build this out further and not worry about making the X appear right now? Could I reset the layer by hiding it? Okay. If we hide the layer, is the thinking that it would bring us back to here and immediately show it again? Yes, fix it. Okay. Let's see what we would do here. We want to fix this thing. So look what we can do. So we can add a new state, and these are storylines built-in states, which I usually try to avoid. But if you see this drop incorrect, let me think. Because what we can do, storyline is just centering this text box on this drop target whenever we get it here. One thing we could do is we could hide storyline whenever it gets dropped here and then make a new storyline appear. I think that's how I'm going to do this. Okay. So hang in there with me, but watch this. I'm going to duplicate where it says storyline. Okay. So I'm going to press Control D with storyline selected. Did that not work? Okay, there we go. So Control D, I'm going to center it again. I want it to be perfectly centered, so let me just drag this down. Okay, so now they're perfectly on top of each other. So I'm going to call this one storyline incorrect. And this text box one, I'll just name storyline. Okay, so storyline incorrect. I want to make this one hidden by default. And I see there are some ideas in the chat, but let's just see if this approach works, and then we'll see who got the closest or who else's ideas would have worked. So I'm going to make the initial state of this storyline incorrect hidden. Okay. So only storyline correct will show up at first. So I'm going to make a new trigger now. So I'm going to change the state of storyline to hidden when the user drops storyline on Creative Cloud. Okay, so now when someone drops the first storyline on the Creative Cloud side, it's going to hide it so it doesn't appear there in the middle, and it's going to make that X appear. So I'm going to press OK, but I need to do one more thing because now I need to show the incorrect storyline option. So change state of storyline incorrect to normal when the user drops that first storyline text box on the wrong side. Okay, and you'll see where I'm going with this. So now on storyline normal, I don't want to change this. So on storyline normal, I don't need to change that X icon. Sorry. On the storyline incorrect text box, I don't want it to do anything if I drag it over the Creative Cloud side, because we already have that X appear and we've already gotten it incorrect once. We don't need anything else to happen. So I'm going to get rid of this trigger that was copied along with this text box that I copied. But I do still want to show the rise layer when the user drops storyline incorrect on the right box. Okay, so this should work. If I lost you, feel free to ask questions, but let's see. So if I drag this over here, there we go. So you see how I did that? I made the first text box disappear, and then I made this new text box appear, and this new text box doesn't do anything if you drop it on this side, because we already told us that's incorrect. But if we drop it on this side, it does what we want it to do. Okay, so does everyone see how we did that? Again, it was a lot, but it works. And that's just something that you'll get better at as you use storyline. Like, something isn't working how you want it to, then you just have to get creative and be like, okay, how can we make this happen with the tools we have at our disposal? So let me see what people said in the chat and just check out these other ideas. Okay, so Dave was suggesting an animation path back to the original location. That would be interesting. That would be difficult, but I feel like that probably could work. So whenever it gets dropped on that side, motion path, you would have to get the motion path starting at the exact point and then bringing you back to the center. That would be cool, Dave. I bet you can make that work. Okay. I see some ideas here. I'm sure there were other ways to do this, but I didn't want to spend too long on it. But well, the next option gets centered, aligned automatically. So Lakshay, the way we did this, remember, is this is a different text box completely. So the text box we drag over here, this gets hidden because this whole layer gets hidden. So we can place these items exactly how we want as we continue here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to delete this rise layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the storyline layer and rename it rise. This is another thing with storyline. You don't want to rebuild each slide like one slide at a time or one layer at a time. Once you get all of this nice programming working on one layer, just duplicate that layer so that you don't have to redo it all over again. Okay, so obviously because I did that, we need to change some things. I need to make sure it's going to the rise layer because I deleted it, so I need to reset that. Good. I need to go back to this rise layer. We need a storyline text box. So I'm just going to copy and paste. Needed this to be somewhere over here, right? I don't want it to be above the hotspot. So the way I'm going to move this down in the stack is just by dragging it downwards beneath the hotspot. And we did that, so that's good. Okay, so that is that. Let's make sure it's centered. I'm going to, I guess I can just align it. Actually, it looks centered enough to me. So there's that. We want this next thing to be rise. And I'm going to go to the format tab and press center. And I want to go and instead of storyline incorrect, we want to name it rise incorrect. So here is the other storyline one. So again, I'll name that rise. And we want to actually change the text in here to rise. Then we will center it. Lisa asked if I can talk about the priority in the timeline briefly. Yeah, Lisa, so you see when I click this, now I can't access storyline. That's because this is above storyline in this stack. So the same way these layers kind of stack on top of each other, the things on the slide also stack on top of each other. So whatever is at the top of the stack, that's what you'll be able to click first when you click on these things. So we just wanted to move storyline below this so that if someone dragged rise right over storyline, it might not count as being dropped on this hotspot because storyline is like above the hotspot and like blocking it. So that's just like trying to avoid future issues basically. Okay. So, and what I've been doing, as you've seen, I've just been changing these where it says storyline here to rise. I've been changing the titles and the text. And we need a new layer now. So now I'm going to duplicate this layer again, and we will call this one Illustrator. Okay. So what we need to do here is we need to take where it says rise. I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to drag it over here. And we can get rid of the trigger on it, and we can just bring it to beneath the hotspot again. Okay, I'm going to move this hotspot. We can probably align that a little bit better. Okay, good. And now instead of rise, we'll make this say Illustrator. We will center it. I'm going to change this to Illustrator incorrect. I'm just setting up these slides. Like you're going to see it all come together in a second here. So I can, and this right here is another way to access things beneath it. Like see here, I'm not going to be able to click rise because Illustrator is above it. But if I press this show hide button, I can temporarily hide Illustrator so I can access what's beneath it. And then we can center that one. Now I'll go back up and show this one. Perfect. They overlap each other very well. And let's see, this should be Illustrator. And this should just say rise. Okay. So the titles aren't super important. It just helps keep things organized for us. So now we need to make sure that our programming is right here. So we want to show layer Illustrator when rise gets dragged over the Articulate 360 Dropbox. This stuff should be good because we already programmed this. So the X should be handled, I would imagine. So let's just see if this works up to this point, okay? Okay, so here we are. If we drag it over here, it's incorrect. Oh no. We drag it over here. And now rise, we drag it around. Oh, wait a minute. That's not good. What happened here? Why? Oh, I think what happened is this storyline's default state is hidden. Yeah. So what happened is I dragged the storyline incorrect one over here on this panel, but the default state of the incorrect one is hidden. So I just need to change that to normal. And I can get rid of that trigger. Let's make sure we didn't make that same mistake over here. I'm sure we did. We did. So we'll change that one to normal, and we will change rise to normal as well. Okay? So now let's preview this and we should be good. Okay, so storyline. So let's do correct this time. There we go. Rise, let's do incorrect. So you see we programmed that once and now it will just work as long as we duplicate the layer. If we drag it over here, there we go. And now we have Illustrator. Boom, 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 boom. Okay? So if there are any questions, let us know. But let's see now how we would program, like what we need to change for getting to the other drop target. So similarly, I'm going to make the layer that comes next. So we will name this one, let's just do like Premiere Pro, okay? So there's that. Now we have somewhere to go. So I'm going to open this trigger up. So we want to show layer Premiere Pro when the user drops Illustrator, not on the A360 Dropbox, but on the Creative Cloud Dropbox, right? Because this is a Creative Cloud tool. So we need to change more things in this case. We don't want to change that icon one to normal when the user drops Illustrator on the Creative Cloud one, because that's the correct one. So we need to change that to Articulate 360. So we basically just need to do the inverse here. That's what I'm doing with right now. I'm just changing these to the inverse because it is the inverse that we're going for. So show layer Premiere Pro when the user drops Illustrator incorrect on the Creative Cloud Dropbox. And this one, we don't need that trigger. That's just a leftover trigger. And you know what? I think because our next one is Premiere Pro, so we know we're going to need to change all of that over again. I'm just going to delete this Premiere Pro layer. And now I'm just going to duplicate the Illustrator layer. Because again, work smarter, not harder. It's easier to change these two unassigned to Premiere Pro than it is to change all of those things I just changed again. So it seems there's some confusion about how these things are getting neatly stacked. So remember, this is a key, like we need to understand layers to see how this is working. Let me show you this, Carol. So watch what happens. So when I drag storyline over here, this storyline that you see right here, that gets hidden. Every single thing on this layer gets hidden, and we're showing a new layer on top of it. On that new layer, we just place the text boxes where we want them to be on the left. So it looks like watch, if I drop it here, it looks really nice. But watch this. You see on this rise layer, we can move this text box wherever we want. This is just a completely new text box. Like I can move it down here, right? So watch what happens now. So if I drag this over here, now it's down here because we can drag it wherever we want. So that's one of the benefits of doing it this way. We have complete control over where things get placed. We're kind of locking it one drop item at a time to do this. So, it really depends on the kind of interaction that you're trying to build, but hopefully that illustrated, like, we can put these things wherever we want. Okay. So let's build out a couple more of these. We are getting there. So this Illustrator one should be good. Now we just need to duplicate this. We need to get rid of the trigger on it. We need to change the initial state to normal. And what I want to do is I want to top align it with this storyline box. So, you see me use these tricks. We select both using the Shift key. I go to the Format tab, and now I press this Align Top button. So when I press that, now they'll be on the same coordinate when it comes to where they're starting from the top of the page. So now we'll center it in this box. I can move this hotspot back. And I can move this lower in the stack. Okay. So this is good. And this, we don't want to say Illustrator. We want this to say Premiere Pro. I'm going to center this. Now we can rename it Premiere Pro Incorrect and hide it. I can call this one Premiere Pro as well. I can center it, call it Premiere Pro. And that should be there. And another way to quickly like show everything that was hidden that I use a lot is I just double tap this show hide all. So if you click that twice, everything will be shown. Hides everything and then shows everything. It's better than having to like scroll through and find the exact things that you've hidden. It's just a quick trick. But okay, so now we need to make a new layer. So we will duplicate this one again, and we will call this one Photoshop. Okay, so now on the Premiere Pro layer, we want to show layer Photoshop when either of these things happens. And we're doing the same thing. So you see, once you get into a swing of things, like as long as you've done all the programming up front, it can become quite easy. Like, because then it's just like attention to detail, right? So I want to do the same thing. I want to select these two, make sure those are aligned to the top. And I probably need to center align this one a little bit better. I notice I didn't do my same trick where I do this and center them, because that's going to center Illustrator to Photoshop, because Illustrator is on the inside of Photoshop. If you look at the right and left sides, that's on the inside. So we want Photoshop to be centered to Illustrator because that one's already centered in the box. So it looks like I went 1 pixel too far. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at these middle handles. So you see now how they're really nicely lined up. So that is what we want. Wait, that should say Premiere Pro, sorry. Wow, so I did all of that for nothing. Okay, well, you get the idea. That's good enough. And is this hidden? Please don't be hidden. It was. Now it's normal. Let's move this down the stack. Let's move this hotspot back over it. These are the things that should say Photoshop. We will hide this. Oh, well, let's rename it first. Photoshop incorrect. We're about to preview this and it's all going to come together. Photoshop, we will center. Okay, I think we are just about ready. I don't think I'm missing anything, but let's see. Let's check it out. Thanks, Julie. Okay, so let's see. So let's just do it all correct and see how it goes. There we go. It is working well. And now let's do it all incorrect and see if that programming stayed true. Okay, we got it wrong. Oh no, we got it wrong. Nope. All right. So there we have it, friends. Any questions about what we've been doing here? You see how we could just go down the list with like literally like how much we could probably fit like 6 to 8 of these in each of these boxes. Okay. So I will see if there are any questions. We could always build this out further if you want, but it's just doing the same thing over and over now that we got the framework working. Is there anything else you want to see? Let me see. I mean, let me try something. Nice. Okay. Here's something cool that we can do. Why don't we just add some like nice effects to this? So what I'm going to add a state to these boxes, okay? So I'm going to edit this state and we will call this like hover. And I try to stay away from these default states. I'm not using the default hover. I'm using my own hover. I'm using 2 R's just so it doesn't say there's already a state with this name. You'll see me do this a lot. Julie, is anyone else exhausted or is it just me? I'm sorry, Julie. I know it's a lot, but let's see. I want to make this have like some kind of nice like glow effect kind of thing going on here. So let's see. We'll do a glow. Let's do from the center. What do I want? Something like this. Okay, this looks better, I think. Okay, so let's say we want this little glow to be happening here, but can we make it happen only on the outside? Probably not, right? Well, maybe if we made the fill white. Okay, yeah. So I made the fill of this white and I added this hover effect. So watch what we could do now. We can make it, I don't want to do this incorrect one. I hid the incorrect one. I'm going to the base one. I'm going to create a new trigger now to change the state of the Articulate 360 Dropbox. And notice this is on the base layer. Objects on 1.1 untitled slide. That's what the name of our base layer is. So this isn't getting the hotspot, which is right. Well, we can't change the state of a hotspot anyway. That's not allowed. So we're changing the state of the actual rectangle on the base layer. We want to change the state of that to hover not when the user drops, but when the object is dragged over. When the user drags the object over the target storyline. We want the object to be storyline. We want the target to be this. This is the hotspot. Okay, they're named the same thing, but it might be confusing. The only thing I'm wondering is whether or not, I don't know if it's actually going to change back. So let's see. Yeah, it doesn't change back. So let's try another way to do this. I'm going to make it so that instead, we're going to change the state of that to hover when the mouse hovers over storyline. Because when the mouse hovers over, you have this option to restore previous state when the user hovers out. So let's see if that accomplishes what we want it to. The only downside now is like when we hover over it. Oh, wait a minute. That didn't work, as you can see. When the user hovers over storyline, we want it to be when the user hovers over this Dropbox. Well, this is just not playing nicely. I don't know why I did that. Change state of this Dropbox on the base layer to hover. When the user hovers over this Dropbox, maybe it's the names. That is just not doing what we wanted to. So let's just go back to when it was like kind of working. And this is another one of those things where it's like, where there's a will, there's a way with storyline. Okay, like we can make it work, but the problem is how long it will take to make it work and how many triggers it will involve to make it work. Jeb is asking if there's a shortcut for when you want to change one thing on the trigger and apply it to other layers. Wow, Jeb, that would be quite the workflow improvement, but no, just good old copy and paste. That's why what I recommend to everyone is like, if you're going to have a slide like this or layers like this, where you're going to have a lot of triggers, build that first layer or first slide out completely before building out anything else. Because you can see if we had 20 layers here with 20 different tools, and then we're like, oh, let's change this thing. Then you have to apply it to literally 20 different layers and who knows how many triggers on each layer. And it can be a nightmare. And sometimes it might make sense to just like delete all of those layers and just duplicate and change a few things. So that's something, yeah, as you get more experience with storyline, it's like you're always looking at how you can duplicate your programming without, how you want to get it right the first time, basically. And iterate as much as you can on one slide before trying to iterate on an entire interaction. But yeah, I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure there's a way we could have gotten that hover thing to work, but I don't think we have time for it right now. But I mean, unless you guys want me to figure it out. I mean, I don't know who I'll stick. I'm sure people have already hopped off, but let me just look at the questions tab. See if there are any questions we can answer. Player options, we covered those. Lakshay is asking how we can freeze correctly dropped items and keep it frozen when the learner revisits to try again for the remaining wrong options. Lakshay, I don't think that applied completely to the approach we used here, but we can always revisit states using variables if needed, change a variable based on where they're at, And then when the timeline starts, jump to a specific layer based on the variables. But that gets pretty complex pretty fast. And then you may just be able to resume saved state of the slide. That could work as well. Yes, the workshop is recorded. Lloyd mentions that drag and drops are very useful for engaging learners. Wondering if you have any suggestions on how to handle situations where you have more than 5 items to drag. Lloyd, I feel like we would need to dive deeper into that to get to a good answer for you. But I mean, you can see presenting one drag item at a time is a really good way to like manage complexity. Maybe not as fun because you can't just drag whatever you want in the order you want it to, but the complexity here is, very, very much reduced because you're being presented with one of these items at a time. So I don't know if that could be an option. Okay. A question about JavaScript. I don't think we'll be covering that today. And what's my opinion on using on-screen navigation versus player navigation? I use the player when I know that the clients will be on board with the player. I mean, it's simple. I think if you can build it custom and build the navigation into the, build like custom UIs, build it into the screen yourself, it can look much nicer, right? Because you can make it much more branded. You have more control over it. So yeah, I think it's just like a budget type thing. Like if there's budget to do a completely custom player, custom navigation, go for it. Otherwise, the modern player gets the job done. And I've used it on many client projects without any issues, even where the screens themselves are very, very custom. We still use that player just for like the next and previous, basically, and for the menu on the side. So Lisa is asking why I don't want to use the built-in tools for hover, for example. Oh, Lisa, the best way I can answer that is those built-in states don't always work as you would expect them to. So I like having full control over them with the triggers over here, because Storyline has all of these built-in triggers that they use when you use these built-in states. Those come with a handful of built-in triggers along with them, especially if you're using like buttons. They have these like built-in selected states and hover states. Like I've been burned too many times early on by the built-in states to ever rely on them. And most times I hear about people having issues with states. It's because they're using built-in states, and we can fix it just by doing it custom. So it's something if you want to use the built-in states, like go ahead and use them, but you probably will run into issues at some point if you're doing anything a tad more complex. So yeah, it's just become the only option for me is just building them custom because I've been burned in the past. Chantel, I'm glad to hear that you were able to follow to some extent, even though you're completely new. I would suggest I know there are some new people, and I know this isn't like Storyline 101, moving through each thing, one thing at a time. But I'm glad you're able to take away some things from it. And I bet you, if you watch this recording and try to build what we built, by the end of it, you will not feel like a beginner anymore. If you can follow along, like pause 50 times, take 3 hours to go through it, but you will have a pretty good handle on how these things work if you make it work. Okay, so I think I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you everyone who hung out here with me until the end. This was a fun one. I'm glad we finally got to do something with layers. Yeah, we got to do some troubleshooting in here and making some things work that weren't working. So thanks everyone, and I will see you all next week. If you want to come to a session next week, we're going to be doing something with Karen North and Alex Drobic. It's a mock instructional design interview session where Karen North is going to be interviewing Alex, and we're going to be giving feedback on Alex's responses like live. So it'll be really good insight into what these interview processes look like. And if any of you are, interview pros out there and want to come and share your insights, I'm sure the chat will appreciate it. So thank you, everyone, and I will see you next week.